Ro, hi, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, Jill. Nice to see you again.
Good, you too. So Ro and I have spent a happy hour during lockdown, chatting and stomping through various local woods, but today we're on Zoom talking about John 18.
Hi, Pete. You all right? You doing okay?
Hi, I'm good, Ned. Good to see you.
Brilliant. Well, we've got this exchange, this famous exchange between Jesus and Pilate, interspersed with his conversations with the Jews.
So should we read that passage first?
Yeah, okay.
Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace as a Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover.
So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?"
If he were not a criminal, they replied, we would not have handed him over to you.
Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law."
But we've no right to execute anyone, they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death that he was going to die.
Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I'm not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests had handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I'm a king, for this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is truth?"
Pilate went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for charge against him, but it's your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the King of the Jews?"
They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising.
Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. And the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they dressed him in a purple robe. They kept coming up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and striking him on the face.
And once more Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I'm bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him."
When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them,
"Here is the man."
As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify."
But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for charge against him."
The Jewish leaders insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law, he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God."
When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid.
He entered his headquarters and again asked Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no reply. Pilate therefore said to him, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know that I have the power to release you and power to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You would have no power over me unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you was guilty of a greater sin."
He tried to set Christ free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you're no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar."
Pilate brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was a day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon.
"Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews.
But they shouted, take him away, crucify him."
"Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked.
"We have no king but Caesar," the chief priest answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. So, I'm interested to know what your reflections are on this passage.
Well, I've never noticed this before, and that's so often the case, isn't it? You know, when we look at the Bible, that Pilate had to keep coming out to the Jewish leaders and to the crowd, because they wouldn't come into him, because if they came into his palace, that would mean that they would be unclean and not be able to celebrate the Passover. And I can almost imagine Pilate's irritation, because there's something demeaning about him having to come out to them rather than them coming into him. And it seems to me I just pick up his irritation, and, you know, it's these Jewish people, they're going on again, and they think they've got this man who's claiming to be a king. And of course he's not a king, but he's claiming to be, and they don't like it. And they've got all these laws, and they've got this festival coming up. And it's a real tussle for who's got the power, who's the top dog. And I've never really noticed that quite so powerfully.
And that's right at the start, isn't it? That right at the start, they didn't go into him because they wouldn't be observing their laws. So right from the start, they're kind of setting out that he's got to do what they want him to do. Yeah. And that kind of seems to be the way that passage like unfolds, isn't it? That they've got this kind of power and influence over him. They're
strong readings, aren't they? I think there's a lot of emotional energy in there, and a lot of conflict that kind of comes to the surface.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a great deal of fighting, as you say. There's conflict. Do you think it's both ways? You know, my question is, which direction is the power struggle? Is Jesus fighting for power, or is he giving it over? What do you think?
I think there's power happening in both directions. That I think Pilate believes that he's the one who has the power, and if anybody was stood there around on the edge of that conversation, they'd be looking at Pilate and just not believing that someone's daring to answer him back, that's asking these really challenging questions back to him. Kind of, I don't know whether you say speaking truth to power, but this is really kind of strong approach from Jesus that Pilate wouldn't have necessarily anticipated, but he's open to the conversation. Somebody else on the boundary of that conversation would be, I think, surprised by it. But Jesus has that, I think, that sense of internal sense of power. He knows where he's from. He knows what he's about. And that's not a power that's kind of been invested on him from outside of himself in terms of the Roman Empire. He's not been brought in and ordered to kind of go there to watch over these troublesome Israelis and Palestinians between them. He knows who he is from above, and that's a very different kind of power when it's kind of from inside.
Do you think he knew this was coming? Do you think he'd sensed this coming over the days before, and that he knew that people were going to be coming to him? Do you think he was informed and he knew about Jesus and what he was claiming, or do you think it almost seems like it came to him as a bit of a surprise?
I think he must have known that Jesus was around, because Jesus had ridden into Jerusalem on a donkey just a few days earlier. So he must have known something about him.
Because there's a sense that he's either, he doesn't know, he's not made his own decision, or he's just not that bothered which way. Like, he doesn't seem to have a strong opinion.
No. I mean, is he being brave when he says that he finds no fault in Jesus? Is he trying just to be adversarial? You know, he wants a fight. He wants to prove that he's the one who's going to make the decision, and they'll have to fit in with his opinion. So he's desperately trying to demonstrate that he's the one who's got the power.
Yeah, the real challenge, the thing that stood out to me is that Pilate sounds like he's performing. He sounds like he's public, but actually he's in his headquarters. He's in his home base. This should be a place where he's relaxed, chill. He knows that he's got the authority, because it's not Jesus's home. It's not Jesus' workplace. This is home territory. And yet Pilate seems to be having to fight. And Jesus my image of it, as you say, standing from the outside watching in, I would be just like, Jesus does not give any impression that he's fighting for his life, that he's just kind of going, yeah, whatever. It's this weird dynamic, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, because I'm sure that nobody has told Pilate for a very long time, you can't tell me anything because you've only got the authority that's given to you, and I know who I am.
Yeah, and to I mean, it must have been a deep surprise for Pilate, member of the Roman Empire, currently running the known world. He is, there's no one above them. There's no one that, so used to just, if you disagree, I'm going to send the soldiers in and you're going to get killed. That's about it. And to have someone, as you say, just turning around to him and saying, I'm not scared. It's just that must be completely baffling. I wonder if he was just genuinely baffled.
He doesn't have the power in the end, does he? Because he seems quite easily swayed. I mean, it interests me that three of the questions that they asked him, that he asked the Jews, only 2 of them they actually answer in straight. So he comes before them right at the start and says, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" And they don't actually answer him. They don't give him a straight answer. If he was not a criminal, we wouldn't have handed him over to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes on to ask towards the end, "Shall I crucify him?" And again, they don't answer. They don't give him a straight answer. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like nobody's quite willing to put themselves on the line and give a definite answer.
But I suppose the Jewish leaders wanted Jesus put to death because of blasphemy.
Well, yes, but it's only inferred that, isn't it? "Shall I crucify your king?" You'd think they'd say, "Yes, crucify him. But somehow people can't bring themselves to give that straight, direct answer.
But then they don't see him as their king. So actually, neither. They're both coming at this whole thing from a different angle.
I think there's something for me though in the length of the conversation that we've got recorded here. That kind of Pilate, there's breaks in the conversation. Pilate goes away. He's then consulting with the Jewish elders, with the rulers. Then kind of coming back to Jesus, who's still kind of in situ. He's about to bring Jesus out, but he kind of keeps on coming back to this conversation because kind of almost I've met somebody here who's actually talking to me, who's not kind of just having that relationship to power, but someone is actually having this conversation with me, and that to kind of to the what is truth question that kind of never gets an answer. This kind of, here's a person who's interrogating me at my deepest sense of who I am and what matters, not interrogating the Roman Empire.
Why do you think, Pete, that he keeps coming back? I mean, that's a really interesting. Why do you think Pilate? Because he doesn't have to. Why do you think he does keep coming back?
Because he's interested. Kind of, you could almost. I love kind of the way John's written this, because you could almost believe that Pilate is really kind of wanting to have that conversation, that dynamic. Kind of, are you a king? Kind of this. I've come into this strange place. You Jews, you've got all these different rules. You want to crucify someone because they claim divine identity. You want to free this other person. There's all this kind of dynamic going on, and the argument. I'm freeing someone because this is your religious holy day. I don't get your customs. Are you a king? Kind of, it's like kind of, well, everybody I meet seems to believe that they're something. And he's just kind of, I think, feels genuinely at the point where he's kind of, I'm in this place that's baffling to me, that someone's kind of these people feel totally able to come up to me and challenge and question me. And he is this one person who's just totally at risk of his life, but having no fear of me. And I think that's something that Pilate hasn't encountered before, and he just stays at that moment.
Yeah, I suspect the majority of that's correct. I think there's a sense in which Pilate will have heard about Jesus, but only briefly, and he was just another upstart. You know, the Roman Empire have faced
lots.
similar Jewish revolts. But for this one, there's a sense in which, I might be able to use this person to get something that I want. And yet he's not really playing the game. He's not really playing by the rules, because, you know, if he was scared, which is what probably Pontius Pilate was expecting, then he could twist it and go, right, you and me, let's negotiate and we'll beat these Jewish authorities. So I'll go on your side. And then when Jesus doesn't do that, he might kind of, that's maybe why he goes to the Jews and goes, okay, let's us work together and try and get this guy go. And so Pontius Pilate does, and that's him flitting between the two. He must, I wonder if he felt stuck in the middle, which is a position which I'm sure he A, hated, and B, was unaccustomed to, you know, without.
I mean, it made me think about the idea of truth, and kind of the answer, asked a straight question, and could they answer it straight? Like, they didn't lie, but they kind of inferred this response, and but they couldn't give a straight answer. And like, it just made me think, kind of, what is truth? Is it kind of not lying and saying something that's kind of not true, or is it actually not presenting the truth in your response, if that makes sense? I just felt like people weren't really answering in truth here. There was this kind of squirming round and manipulating and kind of inferring things, but they didn't actually want to put themselves on the line and give a straight answer.
Well, this isn't justice, is it? Neither of them are really interested in justice. It's more to do with power. What do you make of Jesus's role in all this, Jill? Well,
I'm interested by that, because I think if I was watching from the sidelines, I would be screaming to myself, why is he not answering? Why is he not defending himself? Why is he just stood there? And I think probably I would be stood there thinking, is he not? Has he got nothing to defend himself? Like, maybe he isn't the Son of God. Like, surely if he was, he would be shouting about that and standing up for himself. Like, how does he manage to keep himself at peace in this? And obviously, because he kind of knows there's a bigger purpose. But strangely, actually, does he have authority, even in his willingness to just be there and not defend himself? Because you'd feel that was a bit victimized.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Well, I just think he actually is the one who has all the power, and the other two, but he's not manipulating the religious leaders nor Pilate. He's letting them, he's just not joining in, because actually he said all that he has to say. He knows what's coming. And his hour has come, as he keeps saying through John's Gospel, my hour has not come, my hour has not yet come. And then he's saying, my hour has come, and he knows what's coming. And that's God's will of what was going to happen. So actually, it didn't really matter what Pilate or the Jewish leaders thought.
And what do you think? What do you think it says to us today? You know, what are we to take away from this? Why has John written this account? What is it that we're meant to be taking away and understanding about ourselves or about Jesus?
I think kind of looking at the history of the early church that this will have been written in, it will have been written in a time when the church was in conflict and in challenge with the powers around them, whether the Roman Empire or the kind of Jewish synagogue. A lot of conflict going on between the different religious groups, as now that are in that society, and a need to speak up and a need to retain a strong sense of what truth is. Not in I think a kind of dogmatic sense, but understanding that relationship with the truth. I think Jesus kind of, for Jesus, his understanding of truth doesn't come from a kind of, this is my list of the things that I believe and am meant to believe, but this is the true relationship that I am in. I am in this true relationship with the Father. I know who I am, that I came from above. And so from that perspective, I will speak truth with courage. And it's that kind of a truth that's with a deep groundedness within itself. And I think there's something for us in these very, very challenging days, and particularly kind of watching the news, and we've had all of the changeover of power in America between Trump to Biden, and the amount of lies that were told there, and the need to speak truth in that situation, and Myanmar going on at the moment, and people standing up at real cost of their lives in a way that we haven't faced, for standing up for truth and against injustice. And I think that these are very relevant things, and it's that sense of truth that kind of we continue to hold, our sense of who we are, what is our identity, and who we're related to. And I think that's, for me, that's where it relates at the moment.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think also the manner in which we hold to that truth, that, again, as I said before, that I just get the sense of Jesus standing and not fighting. You know, he's not shouting, going, listen to me, I've got the truth, listen to me, I'm going to tell you the truth, you know, listen to my truth. He's just kind of, he answers the questions very succinctly, and often not really answering the questions in the way that Pilate wants to, but they're really slimy questions. You know, a lot of them are just, you know, are weighted with gotcha questions. And Jesus just keeps repeating himself and just going, I'm not of this world. I don't need to do this. You know, fine, ask me the question. And is there a place for us as Christians in a world where everyone is shouting louder and louder, because truth is such a slippery thing of what is fake news, what is lies, what is true, that sort of stuff, that we actually a sense of, again, for me, a lot of the last few months have been a call to be sanctified and to be set apart. And that's just again, I'm not going to get involved because I don't need to be invested in this world as much. You know, I'm invested in terms of the kingdom of God's coming, but ultimately, if people don't understand, then Jesus wasn't understood. So I'll just stand quietly, answer the questions when they're addressed to me, but otherwise, I'm just going to stay true to what God is calling me to, which, to be honest, I don't always understand.
And I think there's something for me that really hit me as we were reading those passages out. Just the moment where kind of Pilate says, "Aren't you going to answer me?" and Jesus doesn't, and actually just the importance of and value of silence within that we tend, I don't know, it's Holy Week, we generally think about Jesus' 7 last words from the cross, but actually some of the way that Jesus lived out his passion most fully was in his silence. Was in the not speaking, of not turning and accusing back his accusers. And I think there's something for me in his encounter with Pilate, that he's told his truth, he's communicated to Pilate who he is, he knows the consequences of having communicated that truth of his identity, and then he rests with that. And I think there's something within that, at a time where we do a lot of these conversations on screen, we're always kind of click to put your hand up, you're waiting for your moment to come in, that actually, what does it mean if I just pull back and listen a little and be present to the conversation as I'm hearing it, and then you let space for something else to develop that's conversational, because Pilate then, out of the silence, is able to choose his way forward from that relationship with what Jesus offered. It's not always a to and fro of argument, but Jesus knows when is his moment. I can be quiet now, I've said what's needed, and to let it go.
And what does that say to us? Like, that's what I wonder. What is that saying to me about situations that I find myself in? How do I see that as the bigger picture of God at work? When do I defend myself? When do I lay back and say, do you know what, God will be my defense, and I will kind of rest in his overall control and purposes?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big question for me. How does that translate to how I live in daily events?
And how do we cope when we're in situations where it just seems disastrous, and we feel powerless? But actually, what does it mean that Jesus has been in situations like that? Only, of course, he did have the power. He could have called down angels to rescue him.
And actually, this situation that he was most vulnerable and powerless actually was turned upside down and was the most like victorious in terms of like overall authority, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The upside down kingdom.
And as a result of that, God's will had been done. The chief priests and Pilate, for them, it was possible for them to be reconciled to God if they so chose. Because I suspect Jesus, it's hard to know, but I suspect he still loved them. He stood there and he loved them.
That's a
in
big
the same
ask,
way
isn't
that
it?
he loved Judas, knowing that Judas was going to betray him.